Hello everyone, this is David, and the movie we watched today is Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Now, this is kind of an awkward one because it doesn't have Godzilla in the title, and all the other Godzilla movies do. But this one is a very important entry into the Godzilla franchise, and I put it right in there with the other ones, unlike some of the other monster movies like Rodan or Mothra, which aren't a direct tie-in to Godzilla, but later basically joined the franchise. Ghidorah has Godzilla in it, has Rodan in it, has Mothra in it, has a new monster in it. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Now, we've talked about Godzilla, we've talked about Rodan, we've talked about Mothra. So what is Ghidorah, the three-headed dragon, or three-headed monster? Well, Ghidorah is an interesting guy. So he is the first in a long line of creatures that are known as space monsters. So he is not terrestrial, he's not created by mankind. He is from space. And in that, he has some interesting elements. Allegedly, he destroys civilizations. So he flies around and he's a malevolent destroyer of life, effectively. He flies from planet to planet and destroys everything he finds. So what can he do? Well, he can fly. So he has that handy trick. But also, he can shoot lasers out of all of his heads. And he has 3 heads. So instead of having arms, he has 3 dragon heads that can all breathe lightning, effectively. Yellow lightning. So he's quite a formidable foe. So let's get into this movie. Also, he's indestructible. He can fly over things to destroy stuff. He can travel through space. He can take on an interesting form because he lands in a meteor form. But let's get to this movie, because this movie is kind of complicated. So it starts off with this police detective being assigned to protect this princess who's going to visit Japan because she has assassins chasing after her. Okay, that's interesting. But there's a bomb on the plane that destroys the plane, so everyone thinks she's dead. Well, it turns out she's not dead. She jumped out of the plane at the behest of some sort of light that told her to do it, and gets rescued by a fisherman. Meanwhile, there's a meteor shower, and a large meteor lands in these mountains, and a group goes to investigate it. Has these strange... Then they get there, and it has all these weird magnetic properties, like all the metal in the group just goes over to it, but the magnetism is erratic. It's not always magnetic, it's just sometimes magnetic, so that's kind of weird. So they're looking into that, and that's kind of strange. So the police officer is investigating, and this woman starts appearing who's making all these prophetic, they call her the I don't remember if they call her an oracle or a prophetess. I think they call her a prophet, and she's making all these predictions. And she says she's from Mars in the English dub, and apparently it's Venus in the Japanese version, but they said Mars in the Western version, the English version, because we have a stronger association with that than Venus. So that's an interesting little change. Doesn't really affect the plot at all. It's just a cute little change up. So she predicts that Rodan will rise from this mountain in this crater, where he allegedly has been sleeping since the movie Rodan. I'm guessing when he was buried under volcanic ash, and that Godzilla will rise from the sea. And they'll start fucking fighting. Because that's what monsters do. Whenever 2 monsters meet, they have to fight. That's their tradition. Monsters don't get along. So they just fight. Whatever monster, wherever they meet. They just do not like each other. They fight. So they're at the volcano, and this guy's hat blows down there. And the prophetess is like, "No, you can't go down there. You're crazy." And the guy goes down there. Oh, sorry. The guy loses his hat, and this other guy offers to buy, if you give me money, I'll go down there and get it. So he goes down, he gets it, and wakes up. And Rodan wakes up. And everyone goes nuts. So now Rodan's running around. Then she goes to this boat, and she's like, this boat can't sail. And the captain's like, "You can't tell me what to do." And she's like, "No, you don't understand. This boat can't sail. Everyone will die." And he's like, "Nope, we're doing it." So the boat sails. Oh, and meanwhile, there's this little side thing where there's a television show with these like kind of wacky television hosts. Didn't translate well, I think, in the American version, but um, I'm guessing they're just as kind of like nutball in the Japanese that they are in the American. They have these kids on, and it's a show where like they try to get actors that used to be there, and the kids are like, "We want to see Mothra," and they're like, "Well, we couldn't get Mothra," and they're like, "Oh, it's a ripoff." But we did get the Mothra's little fairies, her high priests, because the little kid wants to see a 300-foot wingspan moth. You can't really fit that inside of a TV studio, but they do with the Mothra song. The fairies are actually very helpful now. They're not being kidnapped or captured or denied things that are owed them like they have been in the previous films. So they're on their way home, and they're going to go take this boat to get back to their island. And they listen to the prophetess, and they're like, "Oh no, she knows what she's talking about." So they don't get on the boat. They go with one of the other characters. So this reporter lady takes, who's I believe the sister of the cop, takes her back to like her hotel room. Turns out the assassins are there too. Like they're in the normal hotel room that she rents, and so that becomes a problem. The assassins come in, try to kill her. The cop shows up, saves her. Godzilla rises out of the ocean, sinks the boat. Twin fairies tell the cop that there's like killers in the room. They turn off the lights to give him a chance. It's kind of an interesting like little like human subplot because they have to do something with the humans to keep it so it's not just monsters fighting all day. So now Godzilla's up. Godzilla's moving around. Rodan's running around. They start fighting. They're just going nuts, and they're like they talk to the fairies, and they're like, "So, can we get Mothra in to like stop this stuff?" Oh, and by the way, at this point, Ghidorah shows up, and he lives in the meteor. Like he is the meteor. The meteor forms up in the Ghidorah, and he starts flying around. And basically, the prophetess is like, "Yeah, by the way, the space monster Ghidorah has come to kill you all, and we need to do something about that. But I don't think you can. So I'm just telling you." And no one believes her at first, but then Ghidorah shows up, starts wrecking everything, and he's just wrecking cities. And Godzilla and Rodan are just fighting. So I'm like, well, what would it take to stop Ghidorah? And they're like, well, the only thing that we could do is the only thing that can fight a monster is a monster, because that's the way this works. Only monsters can fight monsters. So, but Ghidorah's so powerful that like one monster isn't going to cut it. But we have these three monsters now because we got Mothra, Rodan, and Godzilla. So they're like, little fairies, can you tell Mothra to see if you can get Godzilla and Rodan to stop fucking fighting and to team up to fight Ghidorah? So they're like, okay, sure. So the baby Mothra shows up because it's back to being babies from Godzilla Mothra, and one of them died off screen, which I think was just for budgetary constraints because they didn't want to have two Mothras running around. But suffice to say, so that happens, and the baby Mothra shows up, and Godzilla and Rodan are just fighting. They're just beating the shit out of each other. They don't even give a fuck that there's like a moth here, or a moth larva. And so he sprays Godzilla with his little webbing, and Godzilla and Rodan starts laughing at Godzilla, and you actually hear like Rodan laughing at him, and then Rodan gets hit with it, and he's flipping out. He's like flipping his head side to side because he's getting shit in his mouth, and Godzilla just starts chuckling his ass off, and they sit down to listen, and basically Mothra's like, so this giant fuck off monster that's gonna kill everybody, so you guys want to help me go fight it? And Godzilla's basically like, look, every time we deal with these humans, they try to fuck us up. So fuck them. That's basically the interpretation that Godzilla gives. He's like, nah, fuck it. I don't want to do this. And the fairies translate this as, Godzilla, what terrible language. And they're like, man, and the people that are watching this are like, wow. Because the fairies are translating. They don't. The monsters talk monster talk, so they make their normal sounds. But the fairies translate because they speak monster. So they're like, wow, these monsters are as bullheaded as ever. So what ends up happening is Mothra goes off to fight Ghidorah by himself, gets his ass kicked, And Godzilla and Rodan see this, and they're like, "Oh man, the little kid just got his ass kicked by a monster that we just basically decided we weren't going to fight. But since we're monsters, let's go fight him." So they fight him, and it's a pretty good fight, all things considered. They do some interesting team ups. Like Godzilla's a good fighter as always, but like at one point Rodan puts Mothra on his back, and they're flying around, spraying Ghidorah with webbing. And eventually, like, they chase Ghidorah off, and he flies off into space. And they convince the monsters to go back to basically so they're not destroying the planet. And that is King Kong. That is Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. It's a pretty good movie. I'd definitely check it out. It's the introduction of Ghidorah. He shows up in pretty much every generation of Godzilla, and he's one of the main antagonists through most of the series. In terms of, he's one of the only monsters that's never a good guy that shows up quite often. I don't remember how many movies he's in, but he's in several of them. At least, I think 4 of the original. I don't really remember off the top of my head, but I think it's at least 4 in the original series, and then he's in a couple of the later ones, which is pretty cool. So yeah, definitely check this film out. It's a pretty good one. It's watchable. There's a lot of stuff going on. So there's like, the mystery of what happened to the princess. There's that kind of assassins coming after her. There's the monsters mashing each other. So there's a lot going on. Definitely check it out. It's definitely worth watching. All right. Good night, folks.